Well, that's good. No concerns. If you would bow your heads and pray with me. Dear Lord, we are so thankful for the privilege and the right to gather together to do your work, to serve others above ourselves. We're thankful to live where we live, where we're allowed to do this. We do pray for all of those that are dealing with adversity, and especially in places where there's not much that they can do about it. We ask that we seek your strength in all the things that we do, and it's in your name that we pray. Amen. If you would join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave.
I'm so happy to see each one of you. And now we're going to introduce our guest. If you brought a guest, if you and your guest will please stand so we can make sure everybody is properly introduced.
I'm very happy to have our wife of our speaker today. I'll introduce Ralph later. But Harriet Cousins is an educator and administrator and a volunteer in the community and a wonderful person. If you don't know her, you're going to want to know her. My husband, Robert Mann, is an author, and he's the senior resource librarian at the Church Music Institute, and his book is nearly out.
Fantastic.
It's on hymnody. Charlotte Test is a retired home economist, and now she just inspires everybody who knows her. We're so glad to know her. Susan Patterson is an attorney and a good friend and on our board at the Church Music Institute. She specializes in estate planning, wills, and works with elder law. I'll get it right eventually. And I'm so glad to have all of them here today. Thank
All
you.
of Charlotte's friends are always so smart. Smart table.
Hello, everyone. I'm honored to introduce one of our esteemed honorees today, Mr. Gabe Rojas, who works for the town of Highland Park as a building inspector, and we'll learn more about him shortly. But thank you for being here today.
Yes, thank you for coming.
We'll go ahead and do that.
Next up, we have Miss Amber Lively, who works for the Parks and Recreation Department for University Park as an administrative assistant. We're happy to have her and honor her today as well. And did you, I'm sorry, I didn't.
Do what?
I wanted to introduce, would you like to introduce?
Oh,
yes,
sure.
I'm sorry.
Man, we got here right in time.
Hi, I'm Ann Allen. I work with Sean Johnson. I'm the park superintendent for the city of University Park, and I love talking into a microphone.
Oh, fantastic.
I have the honor today. Sean, did you want to do this? The mic was just handed to me, but maybe you're the right person to do this. Okay, sorry. Yes, so I work with Sean and Amber in the Parks and Rec Department.
We're so happy y'all are here.
So everybody, please sit down. No standing ovation. Please stop. Sean Johnson, I have the pleasure of introducing and recognizing my right hand, left hand, right foot, left foot, you name it, she does it all for our department. And not only our department, but the entire city. So that's Miss Amber Lively, who will be recognized today for her significant contributions to the city of University Park.
I love that. Welcome. Welcome to each of our guests. We're so glad that y'all are here. And now, Mr. Nolan Duck is going to highlight Sean Foster. He's our PCR Marketplace advertiser. Thank you.
Thank you, President Happy. It's my pleasure to introduce or to thank Sean Foster. Sean is a part of Foster Financial. His dad, Larry Foster, founded the company in 1969, and he and his brother Joe joined him in Foster Financial in the 80s. Now they operate on a fee basis and offer a complimentary second opinion to services and Rotarians as they are working with clients to help them, take care of their money, and that's a good thing. We need to have people who are using the golden rule to help other people in managing their money. If you're concerned about your money, how your money is going to be invested, how you're going to respond to the Tax Act that's going to be introduced probably later next year, when you should claim your Social Security, concerns about running out of money in retirement, well, they're the people to talk to. So let's thank Sean Foster for his contribution to the Hub and helping to support that, and we appreciate him so much. Thank you, Sean.
And now we have our Happy Bucks. Let us know what happy news you have, what you're really excited about that you want to share with everybody. I am really grateful. I wasn't paying attention. I was in a rush when I left, and I started off driving apparently really fast. Next thing I know, there's lights behind me. And I'm really grateful. I had a really nice police officer that just gave me a warning, so I'm very grateful. Anyone else have some happy news that they're excited about? Kyle.
My brother in Fort Worth had a healthy son about 3 weeks ago, so I am an uncle.
Congratulations, Kyle. Woo-woo! Okay, excellent. And now, without any further ado, Cub has one. I'm sorry. Cub and Sean.
SMU is 7-0.
Go SMU!
I'm gonna double that. SMU is 7-0.
Way to go, Richard. And Cub.
Cub's got one. My wife and I did an experiment in Mississippi, 1,500 miles, and we rode the Natchez Trail from Tupelo all the way down to Natchez.
Wow, that's a long trip.
Oh, Tom's got one.
Tom Rhodes.
All right, a big yeah.
Whoa.
I ran off without my mic.
You talk about being pulled over by a policeman. This is about a friend of mine, so I deposited $20 for him. But he said he got pulled over. It was about 5 o'clock in the afternoon. He got pulled over by a police officer, And the guy said, "Oh my gosh, I'm about off duty, but if you got a good story, I'm gonna let you go." And he said, "You know what? I heard my ex-wife was dating a police officer, and I thought you were bringing her back to me."
Thank you, Tom. I love it. Great. And now Major Todd Hawks is going to introduce our public service honorees. Every month we honor someone from HP and UP for their outstanding service. Come on up.
Well, thank you, Happy. It's my honor and privilege to introduce our honorees today. They've already been introduced, but we're going to learn a little more about them. I found, particularly as I was reading Amber's, that you've got quite an interest in pets and classic cars. I'm going to hear a little more about that. So Amber Lively is the administrative assistant at the City of University Parks and Recreation Department. Amber celebrated her 19th year, hard to believe, 19th year with the City of University Park on July the 10th, 2021. Amber's a member of the Parks and Recreation team, serving as the administrative assistant, as Sean has already noted, his right and left arms. She's a native of the Dallas area. Amber attended and graduated from the University Irving Nimitz High School, and afterwards earned an associate's degree in North Lake Community College. Amber does a tremendous amount for the Parks and Recreation Department and is the glue that keeps everything together, from working with the Parks Advisory Committee as the board secretary to assisting residents with reservations and pool passes, and working directly with the management team, daily assisting with the management functions. Amber is a vital part of the Parks and Recreation Department and considers many of her co-workers to be her chosen family. Amber and her husband have been together for 22 years, married for almost 17 of those, and have one beautiful and amazing child, Miss Lucy Lively. They're also parents to an abundance of rescue animals, 3 dogs. I want to get this right because it might have changed since this was written. 3 dogs, 2 indoor cats, 17 outdoor feral cats, and 2 guinea pigs. And as a family, they enjoy working and driving around their collection of classic cars, and they're always on the hunt for another classic car project for either themselves or their other gear-headed friends. So, Amber, it is a pleasure to have you with us today. Would you join us here, please, on the platform? As Amber comes, I'm going to invite us to get to know Gabe. Gabe Rojas began his career as a code enforcement officer with the City of Farmers Branch in 2004, and then in December of 2015, the town of Highland Park provided him an opportunity to become a licensed plumber inspector, which now has evolved into a building inspector. In all, he has a total of 17 years working for a municipal government. Prior to this, Gabe proudly served 4 years in the United States Marine Corps as a military police K-9 handler. Gabe loves the small town feel of Highland Park and enjoys assisting residents, co-workers, and contractors alike to the best of his ability. Being a building inspector, and fulfills his desire to help others while ensuring a sound and safe home is built, as one home is their safe place and even greatest possession. His passion and dedication to his work led to the 2019 Employee of the Year recognition. He is usually found volunteering at HP Can. And he can tell you about all those volunteer opportunities, but he is a busy man. At many of the town's events, he's an avid cyclist, enjoys spending time with the family, watching his kids play sports, and cheering for the Dallas Cowboys. Gabe resides in Plano, Texas, is married to Olivia for 15 years, and has 2 wonderful children, Gabby, and Joshua. Would you, Gabe, please join us, and would you together welcome me, Amber and Gabe, as our October nominees this morning.
Tiffany, you want to come up and join us? Sean, see that? Of our team. Thank you. Congratulations. Thank you.
Congratulations again, and this is a team effort, by the way. You can see some of the other teammates, so thank you again.
And now David Rubin is going to give his new member speech. Come on up, David. So in the new member packet, there's some tasks that they have to do, and David's getting his new member speech all crossed off. Come on up, David. Welcome.
Hi, this is a great turnout just to hear my new member speech. And I have it written on a piece of paper that I cannot read, which just reminds me my mom always said I should have been a doctor. But I'm not. Basically, I'm from San Antonio, go Spurs, and although not this year, this is next year's. And I'm a graduate of Alamo Heights High School, class of '74, proud to say the top half of the bottom third. Jody, he was from San Antonio. He's also Alamo Heights. I somehow managed to make it to University of Texas because back then you really just needed a check for $100 and a heartbeat, and you got in. And I have a son there now who's a sophomore, and believe me, it's not that easy. Basically, I went to UT in the art department, and in the art department, they kind of make you take foreign languages, and I found out I was kind of good at it. So I got an art degree and then went for a linguistics degree, and I'm a little bit of a vagabond, and I just decided, well, I'm going to move to Paris, which I did in the early 80s, and I taught in a French high school, Lycée Henri IV, which is in the 5th. Best 2 years of my life. I had to come back to San Antonio. My dad got sick and unfortunately passed at an early age, and I joined the family business, which was a men's store in San Antonio called Joseph's. And it's a lot like Colwell and Son, but a little bit schmaltzier back in the day. Y'all know what schmaltz means, right? Okay, good. And my job, since my brothers were married and raising kids and I was single and not raising kids, so I did a lot of the marketing, merchandising, traveled to the markets, and it was basically a lot of fun. But my brother said, we need to do service. So we drew straws. I don't know who got the short straw, but I kind of got Rotary. So I was a Rotarian back, I think it was probably mid to late 90s. And I remember we had the national convention there in 2001, just before 9/11. And my job was going to the airport and greeting people coming from any French-speaking countries, Spanish-speaking countries, Italy, Germany, and then if they spoke any Asian language, I got on the phone and called my wife, who's Chinese. And so we kind of had that covered. But then I was asked to leave because of the, draconian attendance policy that they used to have in Rotary. Even though I would try to make up in my, I used to go to Paris all the time, and I go to Rotary clubs there, and it was awesome. The food was great, that champagne and wine. We don't ever have that here. But they did, and I understand it's not quite like that anymore. And so then I had gotten married. My wife works for AT&T, and we got transferred. She got transferred up here in 2010. She's been there. I have no idea what she does. She says, I can tell you, but I have to kill you. I said, fine. You just yell at your people about money and gajillions of dollars and all that and all good. So we decided to move up here. She got a nice promotion, and I became caregiver to our two boys, who were about 5 and 7 at the time, and reinvented myself. I opened a store in Addison, but unfortunately had a pretty lousy partner, so that didn't last long. But I think y'all understand the travails of working spouses and how that works, trying to raise kids. And I didn't want to pay anybody to raise the kids, so I had to find a career that would allow me to raise my boys and spend the time I needed to with them. And I became a teacher, a translator, and a photographer. And the photography took off. So I guess I really became professional about 2012, 2013, 2015. I started photographing in schools. And I now have several thousand students that I do. That's kind of how I help feed my family. I also do art, fine art photography. I've had 8 shows, 2 of them back in Paris, which I go back to all the time. And the way I made it to your club was a little bit due to COVID, because normally in June, I spend June in the month of Paris and I photograph children's shows in different theaters and some adult troupes. But I didn't go the last 2 summers. And so there's the 4th of July parade. I hadn't been in years. So I went down there, took my camera, photographed, and put them on Park City's chatter to just to anybody that wants them. I was just kind of shooting. I didn't know who I was shooting. And somebody called me, JR or somebody, and said, we saw your pictures. Could we use them for Rotary? And I said, yeah, of course. That's why they're there. And I thought, gosh, I used to be in Rotary. Try that again. So here I am. Thank you all so much.
Stan Wright, he's going to give us an update on the Ntfb packing day. He thought I was going to forget him. Come on up, Stan.
Thank you, Abby. This is to recap what we did last Saturday. How many were there last Saturday? Raise your hands. We had about 28 people show up. We had a great time. I know several of you had excuses. They had to organize their sock drawer and underwear drawer, and I'm not going to call out anybody like Tom Rhodes, I'm sorry. You had to prep for colonoscopy, didn't you? Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't mean. I'm sorry. So anyway, everybody had. So anyway, we did a lot of good last Saturday. Had a lot of fun. We prepared about 6,000 meals, and what that was about was, in Dallas, in this area, a lot of the kids, the only time they get food is at school. When they go home over the weekend, there's not much in the cupboard. So what the North Texas Food Bank does is they give them these bags of food to take home so they have something over the weekend, and that's what we did. And our group did like 6,000 of those Saturday morning. So we did a lot of good, and I want to thank everybody that showed up. Thank you very much. I'm trying to do that 2 times a year, so I'll probably do another one like in probably March or April, and don't use that colonoscopy excuse. That's already been used. Okay.
Yeah, we had the maximum turnout. Everybody did a great job. Congratulations. And Duran Castleberry with Rotary Club of Dallas Uptown is going to tell us about their Men Who Cook event. We'll have to add that to the calendar. It's a fabulous event. Lots of great food. Come on up, Duran. He's going to tell us all about it.
Thanks, Abby. This is kind of a last-minute deal. I called her yesterday. I said, do you think I can make it a little bitty speech? She said, sure, come on. So Happy and I go way back. She was a fellow Rotarian at Uptown Rotary Club. We were like charter members, and I'm the last one left. They've all fled. But we have a great club, and we have a good event every year of the Men Who Cook. We have about 20 cooks. We have a live band, wine pool, silent auction. So it's just a great event, and there'll be dancing and all sorts of stuff. So I want to invite you. There's a QR code on here you can take with you, and if you feel like going, click on here. You can buy your tickets online. It's super simple. And I was going to say about the new member. I know he's a new member because I was out there in the hall with this on. He said, do you take my ticket? I said, no, I don't work here. So good luck with that guy. No, I'm kidding. It's November 6th, and it's at the Beehive. It's in the Design District. So y'all come on out and have fun. See ya. Thanks, Happy.
Exciting. It's a great event. I will definitely be going. Lee Wagner is going to give our, past president Lee Wagner is going to give our membership minute. Come up, Mr. Lee. And then Barb Jeffries is going to, past president Barb is going to give us an update on the nominating committee. We've got lots of great updates for you.
So I kind of think like
most of y'all in the room that are members of this club, you probably arrived here the same way I did. I was invited to come to a lunch. In fact, I was just remembering, I joined this club 20 years ago this month. It was October 2001, right after 9/11. So I was invited by Carl von Bieberstein and Jody Ray, actually more than once. I kept saying, oh, I don't think I want to go. But I finally did. And when I came here, I realized it was kind of like home sweet home. It felt right, and these 20 years have sort of flown by. So thinking about the 20 years, I want to mention a couple more things. We had a new member that Chris Short was his name. Some of y'all may remember him. He had to move out of town. But I was introducing Chris to the club, and I didn't tell him I was going to do this, but he's standing up here, and I said, Chris, turn around, and full circle. So he did what I asked him to do, which was kind of crazy in a way that he even did that. But he looked at me like, strangely, why did you ask me to do that? And here's what I told the club. I wanted the club to recognize that he was like 20-something years old when he joined, that this is not a club just for old guys with white hair. And what's been fun about these last 20 years is clearly with the amount of young people we've had join, with the number of women that have joined, the number of women in leadership that are here, it is impressive. Some of y'all may not know, Rotary in the 80s went from an all-male organization to accepting women. So I think that was a huge change that none of us would ever want to go back on. The last thing is this. The thing that really most appealed to me was and still does, is the four-way test. I'm a lifelong Methodist, and part of it is like, striving to perfection, knowing we're not going to get there, but you've got to strive for it. I view the four-way test as something we should all strive for every day of our lives. I try to do that, but I know I'm still striving. But the year I was president, which was 2008, 2009, I suggested that we end our meetings by reciting the four-way test. Prior to that, we had not ever done that. And I just felt like it was something that could be done and should be done. And what I'm really pleased about is that for 20 years we've been doing that, and it has never wavered. So for that, I'm grateful too. So anyway, that's your membership minute.
Thank you, Lee. Yes, it's a terrific tradition. And past President Barb is going to give us an update on the nominating committee's reports and slate.
Hello, everybody. Well, thank you for that, Lee. I didn't know that you started that four-way test reciting. That's wonderful. According to our bylaws, we formulate a nominating committee which is approved by the board. That has happened. Those committee members were Jeff McNaughton, Jeff Sheehan, Paul Pyrock, Valerie Palin, Philip Bankhead, and President Happy, and myself. The nominating committee has met several times and come up with a slate of officers. Thank you to many of the members in the club whose names I'm going to read who live by the motto, service above self, and were able to say yes when asked. So the slate of officers for the Rotary year 2022-23, so it will start in July next year. If you would stand, please. President is Jeff McNaughton, President-elect Jeff Sheehan, Vice President Nolan Duck, Secretary Pat Martin, Treasurer Mark Kasher. We have 7 directors. The first one, John Brown. Director number 2, Jen Hammond, Kyle Marmillion, Sarah Ollier, Valerie Palin, Marcia Zeidel. And the 7th director is pending your vote, which will happen next Friday. A new director position, Mark Neese. Director at large will be Paul Pyrock. Happy will return as immediate past president. Sergeant at Arms, Kathy Wall, and Parliamentarian Lee Wagner. So these good folks, thank you for saying yes. We will, appreciate you standing. We will read the slate again next week. At that time, I'll ask for nominations from the floor. You're certainly willing to do that, and then we will vote on this slate of officers at our regular meeting on November 19th. So please attend so we'll have a quorum. Thank you.
such a great slate. We have a bylaws change that we're going to recommend. We recommend adding a 7th director to our boards. We'll have 16 members. I recommend that we add Mark Neese to our board as our public image director. You know, one of the areas that Rotary is really focused on is public image. We really find it essential for our club to actually have a director that's focused on public image. We have a huge public image team that's been under Patsy Watson's leadership, and so it'll be, she's done a tremendous job. We're looking forward to building that further out by having an actual board position that's focused on public image. See the TV monitors for announcements. We have a lot of things coming up. And without any further ado, our awesome Charlotte Croker is going to introduce our incredible speaker. Come on up, Miss Charlotte.
It's a real privilege today to introduce our speaker, and I can take no credit, really. The credit belongs to my good friend Charlotte Test, who I met when I first came to Dallas. And I know all of you are lucky enough at some point in time to meet a really wonderful, important person in your life, and Charlotte is that person to me. And I get to tap her now and then and say, what do I do about this? And I come away with a really good answer. She introduced me to Harriet and Ralph Cousins, who have been good friends of Charlotte and her family for a long, long time. And when you're a Johnny newcomer to Texas like I am, you need those kinds of people to introduce you to the kinds of people you want to meet. And I am just very, very fortunate. Ralph is a Renaissance man who, when he speaks, he has something to say. He and Harriet go about their lives quietly doing good in our community. Today, we will hear about George Porter because Ralph has the intellect, the education, and the skills to put together a story that only Ralph could do. And please read about his biography in the hub that Betty has so nicely put together for us. And the story itself, which is longer than what we can hear about today, is in the Dallas Historical Journal from spring of earlier this year. Ralph is a cancer survivor, and if you ever want to know how to do it, Harriet can do it. Harriet is his greatest support, and the two of them are just, you don't want to get in their way. When they can do just about everything. To know them is to be inspired, and we're so looking forward to what you have to say today. Ralph, thank you for taking time to be with us. Ralph Cousins.
Thank you, Charlotte. That was very gracious and unnecessary, but I appreciate it nevertheless. I want to thank the Rotary for inviting me. And Lee, I'm with you. Any organization that is restricted to gray-haired people, I don't want to be a member of, since I have neither hair nor gray hair. It was a warm September morning in 1936. George Porter was getting ready to go to the courthouse. He had been called for jury duty. He had served on a jury, or had attempted to serve on a jury, twice before, once in 1921 and once later. And both times he was harassed and threatened. George Porter was a black man. The day promised to be clear and hot, The fair was over, as if George could have gone to the fair anyway. He was going to be met to take the train car, the streetcar downtown by three friends who were going to observe what happened during the day. He lived on State Street in the State Thomas neighborhood that was then called North Dallas. Jim Crow was an unremitting presence on every black person's shoulder, from daily humiliations to minor and major outrages and lynchings. The fear of overstepping a boundary was ever present. 3 blacks were lynched in Texas 2 years before. And in May 1930, George Hughes, a black man in Sherman, Texas, was accused of raping a white woman. The Grayson County, just this past week, passed an ordinance putting up a plaque. Mr. Hughes was attacked, burned to death, and the black area of Sherman was burned. Mr. Porter was to be met by Reverend Ernest Estelle and Dr. B.E. Howell. They had volunteered, as I said a moment ago, to go with him. Let me see if the clicker is working today. Mark, can you go to the first, yeah. In the spring of I said earlier 36, it's 1938. In the spring of 1938, Walter White, who was the national president of the NAACP, had come to Dallas to speak at the YWCA about the lynching bill that was currently in Congress. Incidentally, there has been a lynching bill introduced in Congress every year since 1918. It's now called the Emmett Till bill, but it's never passed. Mr. White was going to speak at the Moreland YWCA, which is now the home of the Dallas Black Dance Theater on Flora Street. His presence caused somewhat of a concern at what was going to be the white YW, and it was moved to the black YW. A gentleman by the name of Earl Hunt, the commander of the Texas Division of the Sons of the Confederate Veterans, wrote to the Dallas Morning News, quote, "If they want to meet at a Negro joint," that's the Moreland YW, "that's their business and we don't care who attends. But they can't bring Negroes in here and mix them with our young white girls at our YW," unquote. Although there's no documented evidence, Mr. White no doubt met with leaders of the NAACP, the Dallas NAACP, because the national office was looking for flagrant violations of what was then called the Civil War amendments of 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. And that's what Mr. Porter was going to do when he went to jury duty that morning. And that was the reason he had some friends go with him to serve as witnesses. The NAACP was the very beginning of their now famous campaign to find cases to take to the Supreme Court to test and to enforce various constitutional amendments. Excuse me. Constitutional amendments, federal laws were deliberately and openly flouted by white law enforcement officers throughout the South. It'll be important to give you a brief background for Mr. Porter because it's important. His father was James Ward Porter, who was born into a freed slave because his mother had purchased her freedom in 1822. Unusually for a black man of that time, he had a liberal education of languages, music. He taught music, reading, and writing in Savannah, Georgia, where he lived, which at the time was illegal. There's some evidence that Mr. Porter was a conductor on the Underground Railroad. Before the Confederate surrender in April of 1865, James Porter was one of 20 black religious leaders who met with Major General William Sherman and Secretary of War Edwin Stanton in Savannah to discuss the matters relating to the freedmen of Georgia. When the Civil War was over, Mr. Porter opened a school for young black children to teach them reading and writing. And the symbolism is awesome. The school was held at the site of the slave auction. Later, he was a representative in the first Congress, first legislature after, for first Reconstruction legislature, and he voted aye when the presiding officer said, "You are required to duly ratify the amendments to the Constitution proposed by the 39th Congress, known as Article 14. What a moment that must have been. His son, the topic of our talk this afternoon, was also an educator, not surprisingly. He attended Atlanta University and graduated in 1899 with high honors. He was mentored by W.E.B. Du Bois, who some of you may know of. And it's likely, there's no evidence that he was, but Dr. Du Bois and Mr. Porter carried on a correspondence for years. Thank you, Happy. For years, so it's likely that Mr. Porter was one of his research assistants as Du Bois was doing his groundbreaking work on race. After Atlanta University, George Porter had several teaching spots. One was at the Colored Agricultural and Normal University in Langston, Oklahoma Territory, where he met his wife and married. He taught at Paul Quinn College, which at that time was in Waco. And he ended up at the Colored High School in Dallas, Texas. In 1917, Mr. Porter resigned from the Dallas Colored High School after Superintendent Justin Ford Kimball refused to equalize pay among the black teachers, male and female. That would be social equality, Superintendent Kimball said. Porter quickly replied it would not matter since colored teachers would receive the same pay. Kimball offered Porter a secret salary if he would not press the issue. Porter resigned. He was a founding member of the Dallas NAACP and was very active at St. James AME Church, which is down now on Good Latimer. Back to our story. The first 2 days in the court, the first day in the courtroom, in the central jury room, there were grumbled threats, some more vociferous than others. However, he refused to be dismissed. The standard at the time was that African Americans would go, I remember it was African American males, would go, they would sign in, they would ask to be excused, they would go to the accounting office, collect their pay, and go home. He refused to be dismissed. Mark the next slide, please. Oh, I apologize, Mark. Walter White is in the middle of that slide, and you'll notice Thurgood Marshall, who we'll see in a moment, and that's Roy Wilkins, the famous civil rights advocate on the left. Okay, yeah. That's Mr. Porter, a photograph from the Dallas Morning News, sitting in the central jury room, obviously by himself. The second day, Sheriff Smoot Schmid, next mark, attended. Sheriff Schmid's an interesting story in his own right. He's the son of Swiss immigrants and played a role in the Bonnie and Clyde saga. Smoot Schmid was in evidence that morning because of the threats and the possible disruption. On the third day, the Dallas Morning News had a line that said, unless he is forcibly removed, George Porter, a Negro college president, will serve the rest of the week. That could be conceived as a call to violence. Sheriff Schmid was on alert again. As Porter took his seat Wednesday morning, the hostility was palpable. His 3 witnesses were there. Early in the afternoon, waiting alone for the proceedings to begin after lunch, 2 white men suddenly grabbed him by the collar, dragged him from the jury room, and threw him down the north steps of the old red courthouse to Main Street. Porter called out to Deputy Sheriff Fred Army, the court clerk, and other court officials to protect him. They refused. A bystander asked Charles Graggs, one of Porter's witnesses, what's that Negro doing? Graggs replied, Porter was attempting to discharge his duty as a juror. The man replied, thank you, Charlotte. The man replied, not here in Dallas, he's not. Within a few moments, scores of whites, encouraging the cruelty, gathered in the hall and the courthouse steps and on Main Street below as Porter, shaken, struggled to stand. He slowly dusted off, straightened his clothes, and pressed through the crowd, climbed the steps, pushing through the onlookers, seeking to obstruct his entrance, entered the courthouse, and resumed his wait in the central jury room. Civil rights activist Juanita Craft remembered Porter in the jury episode. She said that when Porter, dirty, bloodied, and disheveled, was told he could be excused, he responded, I'd rather not. I'm not in a hurry. I'd rather serve. The presiding judge at the time was Payne Bush. If there's any lawyers in the audience old enough to remember Payne Bush. That's a picture of him from the Dallas Bar Journal much later. Judge Bush had a problem. Actually, he had 2. One was the constitutional and legal problem, the exact problem the NAACP wanted him to have. Leaving Porter in the central jury room risked more violence. Judge Payne could have ordered Porter out of the courthouse, but to do so would have violated his constitutional right or his sense of duty. The second problem that Judge Bush had was that he was elected by the voters of Dallas County, more specifically, the white voters of Dallas County. The Dallas Morning News columnist Lynn Landrum eloquently praised and summed up Judge Bush's dilemma. Quote, he knows that the Negro has not only the right but also the duty to serve. He knows full well that the majority of the white Democrats to whom he must look for renomination and reelection to the bench prefer not to have Negroes in the courthouse. Seeing a likely peaceful way out of the impasse, Judge Bush sent Porter to Judge John Rollins' court. He sat on a voir dire panel, and he was dismissed by both attorneys. He still refused to leave. He told Judge Rollins, I insist on my constitutional rights. Finally, he was sent to the court of Judge Sarah T. Hughes, who counseled Mr. Porter that more violence was possible and he should go home, which he did. Word of Mr. Porter's attack and assault traveled fast. The Associated Negro Press Association, which distributed news nationwide, sent the story on the wire, and it received the attention of the national NAACP. Walter White possibly had the case he was looking for. White wrote Governor James Allred requesting an investigation. Allred did so, but White also sent Thurgood Marshall to Dallas to investigate. Before Marshall even left excuse me, I'm having spasming in my throat. So before Marshall even left New York, he received word that he'd be killed if he even came to Texas. So Marshall requested protection from Governor Allred. There we go. Thanks, Mark. Bob Jones, the police chief in Dallas, said, quote, about Marshall's trip, "A black lawyer from New York is coming to stir up trouble. I will personally take him and kick the crap out of him." And I've made the language a little less salty. Seeing a likely, pardon me, I'm going the wrong way. Dr. Tom Smith, former executive director of the Old Red Courthouse Museum, reported that in doing research for the museum, he interviewed A. Maceo Smith's widow, Fanny. He asked her about George Porter. He asked Mrs. Smith if it was true that Thurgood Marshall visited Governor Allred in Austin to request protection. Dr. Smith reported that Fanny Smith threw back her head in laughter and said, "If Thurgood went to see Allred in the Capitol, he entered through the kitchen." Allred assigned a Texas Ranger to accompany and protect Marshall while he was in Texas. Marshall stayed in Dallas for 5 days. He met Judge Bush, not George Bush, Porter, and the leadership of the Dallas NAACP. Juan Williams, in his biography of Thurgood Marshall, says that Marshall told him one day leaving the courthouse, he was confronted by the police chief, Bob Jones, with his pistol drawn. "Hi, you black son of a bitch, I've got you." The Texas Ranger protecting Marshall, also with his gun drawn, stepped between Marshall and the police chief, saying, "Fella, stay right where you are." Marshall and the Texas Ranger, with his gun still unholstered, got in the car and drove away. 2 weeks after Porter was assaulted, Ira Dickinson was called to jury duty and was not harmed in any way. There's no evidence to support it, but it's possible and more likely that Marshall was in the courtroom. When Marshall returned to New York, they set aside the Dallas George Porter incident because it probably didn't have the facts that they were looking for. In November, Texas Rangers arrested George Miller and Fred Guthrie for assaulting Porter. George Porter remained an officer and important leader in the Dallas NAACP until the late 1940s. In 1940, Mark, could you put up the George Porter testifying there? A group of NAACP members in Dallas went to Washington, and Porter testified before Congress on the anti-lynching bill. Porter is there to the right. Judge William Hassey, Dean of the Howard Law School, is to the left. Walter White in the middle, and Arthur Spingarn, a very important member of the early NAACP, on the right. Mark, could you put up the next slide, please? Even as he aged and his eyesight slipped away, I fail to tell you that people believe that Mr. Porter's eyesight was damaged in the attack, and he eventually went completely blind. In 1940, the Dallas Morning News reported quite a stir has been created in Dallas last week when George F. Porter made formal application to fill the job of city manager during the absence of James Aston, who was called for a year of service in the Army. Porter eventually went completely blind. In his last days, he operated a newsstand at the State Theater on Thomas Street. Fred Jones, one of the observers to Porter's attack, related in his very poignant serial biography of Porter, 30 minutes before his death, his old friends Charles Graggs took Porter a pitcher of lemonade. Porter said, "Graggs, I'm depending upon you to help with this race question." Porter died in August of 1951. I hope there's a few moments for questions if anybody has some. And I apologize for my voice. Because of this, I have some problems here. So, yes, ma'am.
As you were telling their story, it reminded me of what I've recently learned about the history of Dallas, and that the Ku Klux Klan, this was one of the biggest areas for the Ku Klux Klan in the 1930s. 20s and 22. Right. And so it seems to me that this story needs to be told over and over again to make people who are not Texans and not Dallasites understand what the history of Texas was and the history of Dallas. So I want to thank you for that.
Real quickly, Texas was third in it's a ranking we shouldn't be proud of. Was third in the number of lynchings between the 1880s and 1950. For some of you that are as old as I am, we were here in the 1950s. There were bombings of African Americans' homes who were attempting to integrate white neighborhoods. So it's a story that needs to be told.
And Ralph, isn't it correct that, to Marcia's question, that the Klan actually, we had the largest percentage of Klan in the in fact, Hiram, whatever his name was the Grand Wizard at Dallas Dentist. Isn't that all true?
Yes.
Yeah, that's what okay, questions? Okay. I got a question. I'll let Tiffany.
Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to say thank you for sharing the story. I think it's important in today's climate where a lot of these type of stories are not being told, that they continue to be told, and I just wanted to tell you I appreciate it.
While somebody's thinking of their question, I have a question too. Is the George Porter story told on a state historical plaque at the old rate? Well, we got a state historical plaque for the first women jurors in 1954. Yeah, Elizabeth Karp and Sarah Hughes and probably Edith DeBusk were already practicing, but women couldn't serve on a jury till 54. They got a plaque for that. any chance of getting a plaque, and who would take the initiative?
It takes a village to do that, Richard. But what I would like to see, and of course I'm not in charge, thank heavens, but I'd like to see an elementary school named after Mr. Porter.
Yeah. Yes. Tom.
Ralph, you mentioned the lynching law. What was that all about?
Well, Tom, the lynch. Well, first off, I think everyone understands what lynching is, and the vast majority, by about 9 to 1, of lynchings were of black people, and very often they were for no cause other than just hatred and bigotry. In 1918, House of Representatives, U.S. House of Representatives, a man named Dyer, introduced a federal statute to outlaw lynching. And then after the Emmett Till episode, which I hope you all know about. If you don't, I urge you to look it up. It's been renamed the Emmett Till and Anti-Lynching Act, but it's never been passed. You can draw your own conclusions about why. It passed the House in 20, I think, or 19, and was stalled in the Senate.
Ralph, Tanya gets the last question.
Okay, I've overstayed my welcome, but go ahead.
No, we're fine.
So, considering how many of us do or do not know this story, growing up and my family being Southern, my father's best friend was black, and there were a lot of things that we learned about at a very young age that when I got into curriculum, we weren't taught. And so I thought all these years later that these things would be taught, and then my own children come home and they're like, Mama, we still didn't learn about Black Wall Street. We still aren't hearing this story. What is it going to take to get real history into the curriculum?
This is Texas. And I don't mean to be flip about your question, because it's very real. It's very important. But we need to have a groundswell of interest, and we need to think very carefully about who we elect to go to Austin. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for the great presentation. A book is being placed in your honor at McShann Elementary.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you.
And after the meeting, if we can get a picture, you and I can get a picture for posterity.
You'll break the camera.
Not hardly. Thank you so much.
Thank
Great
you,
presentation.
I appreciate it.
Thank you, Charlotte, for a great presentation. Next week's meeting is also going to be lots of fun. We're going to have 44 farms. We're going to learn about the beef industry from Sarah Ollier is bringing our speaker. It's going to be a lot of fun. And quick shout out to past President Tracy Gomes. You know, he's in Santa Fe, New Mexico a lot. I was really excited to turn around and see Tracy. Welcome back, Tracy. And before you leave today, be sure to get a picture in front of the red carpet screen so you can post on your social media. Without any further ado, Jen Hammond is going to lead our four-way test.
All right, before you get excited and start immediately, hold on just a second. The four-way test is an ethical guide for Rotarians to use for their personal and professional relationships. The test has been translated into more than 100 languages, and Rotarians recite it at club meetings. Please recite with me. Of the things we think, say, or do, first, is it the truth? Second, is it fair to all concerned? Third, will it build goodwill and better friendships? Fourth, will it be beneficial to all concerned?
Have a great Friday and weekend.